What's going on, guys? My name is Noah, and in this video I want to share with you everything I just learned from my psychiatrist as it pertains to depression, anxiety, and even addiction. Alright guys, thank you for checking out this video. I am literally sitting right outside the office of my former psychiatrist, Dr. Powers. I recently relapsed into depression around mid-April. I hadn't seen him in a really long time. He was there for me when I had this massive breakdown back in 2011. But as I started to drink a bit to cope with the depression over the last couple months, I was actually in the midst of a visit with my drug and alcohol counselor telling her that I'd made that connection. I'm starting to drink specifically to treat depression beyond just like I want to have a good time. And she suggested I start Wellbutrin, or at least consider starting Wellbutrin, which is a medication, an antidepressant that affects dopamine, which is one of the main things that, okay, sunshine, fine. What terrible timing. Anyway, dopamine is one of the main things that alcohol triggers. So I digress. When I was still really depressed, this was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I put in a call to Dr. Powers. He's the only psychiatrist I personally ever had. He was the only one I'd feel comfortable going to see to consider being on a medication, because I'm low-key scared of being on medications, side effects, stuff like that. So I made the appointment, and in that time frame, my depression seems to have lifted, which is strange timing. That being said, I'd already called his office, so he returned my call, and even though my mood's been better for the last couple weeks, I know that depression can relapse very easily. It's always relapsed for me, up and down, up and down. So I still wanted to go ahead and have that visit. And now we're going to talk about everything we learned during that time. So I know it's kind of a long-winded backstory, but I want to give you some context for whatever it's worth, and let's get into it. So I made some notes. Dr. Powers brought up that euphoric opiate-like feeling that we get, that dopamine dump that we get when we drink, that as great as that feels, as soon as we start to come down from that, something known as dynorphine, it starts to go up. And dynorphine goes up when alcohol levels go down, creating a negative affect, a negative emotion, and for a lot of people, anxiety, which is something that I brought up to him that I couldn't really tell so much if drinking was like negatively impacting my depression. I mean, hell, it was making my depression feel great in the time that I was, oh, I meant to talk to him about this, I forgot, shit. Well, listen, I'll tell you guys, and I'm sure I'll learn something from you, but what I noticed is that drinking was making depression feel good, and that I was also noticing that the day after I drank, a little bit hungover, definitely a little more anxious, which plays into what he's saying here, but I definitely noticed that my depression was still better. My overall mood and outlook was better, and it kind of lingered for about 2 days after drinking. And I've heard some people talk about drinking and then getting way more depressed, and that hasn't been my experience. But anxiety absolutely has gone up for sure, which is a major deterrent, which is why I was already backing off anyway from the drinking a bit, and I'm inclined to back off even more. So, because I'm someone that clearly, I feel more physically anxious when I drink, and I hadn't dealt with much anxiety this past year when I was sober. He also informed me that people that struggle with depression, such as myself, and have a history of alcohol abuse, the likelihood of them relapsing into drinking if they aren't aggressively treating the depression, be that through therapy and or let's say a pharma medication or some sort of holistic approach, but the point is actively treating the depression, he says it's like double the chance that you're gonna drink again, which makes sense. We talked about cold showers, that he ended up spending a year taking cold showers, studying under Wim Hof, learning different breathing techniques and stuff like that. And he brought up it being a really energizing experience for him. He was taking a cold shower every single day after doing about 20 minutes of breath work rather. And so something for me to consider. He says the science is a little, but his personal experience, his anecdotal experience, and the experience of a lot of people he's been in contact with is pretty profound and phenomenal for improving his positive emotion, improving his energy levels, and getting him into the present. I've heard about cold showers. That shit just sounds hard. I feel like I would do better with full immersion, but it's still something to consider, something he brought up. We also talked about something called the default mode network of the brain. He says that this is something that people who struggle with depression tend to have elevated more than people that don't. The default network mode of the brain, and I might be saying that wrong, but I think that's what he called it. That is the part of the brain that has someone more inwardly focused and basically just ruminating. I think you might describe it. And he kind of described the way I describe my experience with alcohol, as well as my experience with heavy lifting, CrossFit training, leadership roles, maybe even something like making YouTube videos and having a channel and having an audience or whatever, coaching CrossFit, did I already say that? Just basically those sort of things. I mean, my meditation practices, even my morning routines, my liking to like tracking all of my food and being a bit neurotic and OCD about that stuff. He says all of that speaks to what appears to be my need, my effort, my desire to get out of the default mode network of the brain, which tends to run higher in people with depression such as myself. And he was talking about the danger of being in the default network mode of your brain too long is that, especially when you're in a depressive swing or cycle, you tend to draw conclusions that aren't necessarily real. And I certainly recognize that aspect of being depressed in myself, and I certainly see it in others even easier. The objectivity of that is just so powerful, but it kind of speaks to the reality that a lot of people feel hopeless even when it doesn't make them hopeless, or the reason a lot of people cannot see through their depression regardless of the literature, the information, the leadership telling them they're going to be okay. It just feels so permanent, it seems so real. It just speaks to coming to conclusions that seem innately guaranteed when they really aren't when you live in that network of the brain, which is why it's so important to have healthy outlets. Alcohol being, of course, when abused, an unhealthy outlet, and then exercise, leadership, morning routines, reading, cold showers. These are all more positive things to engage with. We talked about the whole thing, like you can't think about much when you're under a 450-pound back squat. You know, it really brings you into the present. And being hyper in the present keeps you out of your brain. And so does drinking alcohol. It takes you out of your brain. And they did some imaging, I'm pretty sure he said, that spoke to this fact that part of the brain really goes down under those two circumstances. So that was interesting. He also spoke to and kind of reinforced something I already believe in, but I feel like I'm going to believe it a lot more. And that is that meditation over time is shown to decrease the activity in the default mode network of the brain, that part of the brain that causes us to be too inwardly focused, too ruminative, too depressive. That whole mode, it goes down over time when you're constantly engaged in meditative practices and you get better at those meditative practices. So for me, I meditate pretty much every day anyway, and I do it in the shower. I've talked about it on this channel. I told Dr. Powers I'm really big into square breathing, and he wants me to continue that and expand upon that and research that and take that serious, because people that get good at that, they have a better chance of staying sober if that's their goal. But if anything, they certainly said it gives them a better chance of not being depressed or staying out of depression if you're already in remission. So that was a huge tidbit right there, that's for sure. Yeah, and then I think those are the main things that I learned. I mean, we chit-chatted and he mostly wanted me to catch up. I gave him some reflections on how things have been going, how I've been feeling. I did open up to him about the fact that a week ago I drank heavily and then I've had stomach pains really bad at the top of my abdomen for about 4 or 5 days. And I got all scared and started researching pancreatitis and gastritis and all this stuff, and I'm just all spooked out about it. My anxiety's been higher. And that's a trend for me too. That's a pattern for me too that I recognized from the past when I was drinking, is that, you know, everything's all good and well, but then I'm really hyper in tune with my body. And I start obsessing and ruminating, and so it's definitely a good deterrent because it makes me not want to drink in general, because I, one, physically care so much about my health and wellness. And we talked about the fact that drinking aggressively, right, binge drinking, directly goes against basically every other part of myself and who I've established myself to be, the person I'm trying to become. So that's kind of like an odd thing, and that's what brought him to say, well, yeah, the binge drinking and the guy who's disciplined with his eating, his exercising, his leadership, his whatever the hell, they all do the same thing. They take you out of the default mode network. So it's not so surprising, but it's something I have to come to terms with. It's something I have to come to terms with. Yeah, it's just interesting wrestling this stuff and just trying to be honest and learning about it. So those are the main takeaways from my visit with my psychiatrist. Now here's the last thing I will say, because this is where the visit ended. One of the main reasons I went there was to see, look, I seem to be, well, I'm having a little bit of anxiety, about physical anxiety from like some burning feeling in my stomach from the drinking. Depression-wise, I seem to be doing so much better. Is it worth jumping on an antidepressant, for example, such as Wellbutrin, to see if it can keep me from getting depressed again? Or is that just silly because I'm not actively in a depressive episode at the moment? And he decided, because there are some potential side effects, he said that Wellbutrin can be a little bit activating for some people. Anxiety might go up as your body acclimates to it. he thinks it would make more sense to wait and see if I do go back into a depressive episode, which I kind of feel like I will, but I guess I'm not positive. But I don't want to put that into the universe as a guarantee. It just seems like something that's going to happen. So we're just going to wait and see. My job right now is to heal my stomach, stay away from alcohol for right now, continue to explore this mindful. I've recognized, and I told this to him, that since I've started feeling better, I've had a lot less interest in drinking, which really speaks to the fact that I was drinking largely to treat the depression, but that if my depression's not struggling, I'm chilling. Like I'm not saying I don't enjoy drinking, but I certainly don't think about it very much, and it was a lot easier to go a week without drinking about. So I have to keep looking at that. I have to continue to have adult responsibility and realistic conversations with myself about the effects of it all, and I don't know, tidy up on the things I can, continue to be gentle with myself, open, honest, whatever. It was just a really nice talk. Oh, he doesn't think I have pancreatitis, which is where I'm all freaked out that I have, which just speaks to my anxious nature. But that's where we're at, and that's where we'll go. So if I end up getting depressed again, I am going to reach out to him. He's willing to prescribe the Wellbutrin to see if that can help. Other than the anxiety being a little high right now, I'm in a pretty good space, and I want to work to be in an even better space and to be as much of service to you guys as I can. But in the comments below, what have been your experiences with seeing psychiatrists? Have they been good? Have they been bad? What are some of the things that you've really learned that you might be willing to share with me and share with everyone else? My name is Noah. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Adios. And Dr. Powers, if you watch this video, thanks for seeing me. Thanks for being an absolute homie. You're the best.